Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Open Line tonight. I'm Carrie Sharp. Glad you're joining us. We have the mayor here with us tonight, as well as Lonnell Matthews Jr., Public Safety and Youth Policy Advisor in the Mayor's Department. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight.
Good to be here as always.
We certainly have a lot to discuss tonight. You know, with the recent week since last Wednesday, the video being released by General Funk of the police officer involved shooting of Daniel Hambrick. A lot has been said, many protests since then. So we're just going to get into it all tonight. But first, Lonnell, I want you to talk about what your job is, because it ties into all of this. So I'm just going to let you have the floor.
Yes, so as Public Safety and Youth Policy Advisor, of course, coming back after my race in May, the primary race, I began to focus on some of the youth violence initiatives that the mayor announced as priority of his, but we also started having a conversation about some changes that need to be made in policing and public safety for our communities, to make sure that we're policing our communities in ways that makes them safer, but also make sure that we're fair and just across the board in our practices. And so I give the mayor policy advice in those areas.
Very good. I want to remind you, this is Open Line, so if you have a question that you would like to ask Lonnell or to the mayor, this is your chance to do it. The number is at the bottom of the screen. 615-737+ is the number to call. And Mayor, if we can just go back to last Wednesday, when the video of the officer-involved shooting was released. You saw it before it was released to the press. How did this come about, that this was the right time to do this? Because the investigation is not complete.
Right. Well, General Funk made the decision that, in coordination with the TBI is doing an independent investigation from the police department of the circumstances of the shooting. So they felt they had made it far enough down the lane in terms of doing the investigation, so that they could release the video without having any impact on their ability to question witnesses or come to a conclusion about what had transpired. General Funk and I both believe that transparency in this context is really important. We've seen instances in the country in the past where the video was withheld for a long period of time and people became suspicious of what was going on. So even though the investigation is not complete, General Funk felt it was important to get the video out, and I agreed with that.
Some folks said that your press conference that very day to announce some policing initiatives was a bit tone deaf when it came to viewing that video and your response to it. What's your reaction to that? Well,
it's certainly a difficult set of circumstances for the city to go through. I felt it was important for me to make sure that the city knew that we were thoroughly going to investigate the circumstances, that we were saddened by the death of Mr. Hambrick, but at the same time that we were going to go ahead and start the process, or move the process faster, actually, in terms of looking at how we're policing, looking at the policies of the police department, and working towards citizen oversight of the police department. You know, it was certainly a moment that I didn't anticipate just a few weeks ago, and I think the community needed to hear the words that I said, calling for patience, letting them know that we were going to finish the investigation in a very thorough, fair way, and that justice ultimately will be served under these circumstances.
You have ordered a review of policing policies. At this time, are you standing with Chief Anderson? Do you think he is running this department well? Well,
there are clearly things we need to look at in terms of the police department, in terms of how we police, and the policies, especially in the areas where we're having very intense policing going on. Chief Anderson and I have spoken, and he's made a commitment to looking at the policies closely and to implementing the changes that our community needs. And I'm supporting Chief Anderson in that regard. You did call for that policy review. Are there certain policies that you really are keying in on, and who is leading this review? Right. So there are quite a few policies I think we need to look at. The use of force policy de-escalation, and also how we deploy our officers in high-intensity manners to try and confront crime. The number one goal and the number one obligation that I have is to make sure that the city is safe, and we're going to make sure that we do that. At the same time, we do have to make sure that we're treating communities that have high level of police with respect and in a fair way. So we're going to look at our policies across the board. We're going to use the policing project to help us do that to a certain extent. It's a group of former police and academics from around the country that have helped other cities under similar circumstances look at all of their policies to make sure that that they're being as effective as possible while we're still keeping our city very safe. And then on top of that, I've made a commitment from early on after I was sworn in as mayor to make sure that we have citizen oversight over our police department. There's a citizens group that's working on that right now, and I felt it was best to defer to their action initially, and we'll see what comes of that. If it ends up getting passed, we'll do our best to implement it. If it doesn't, for whatever reason, then we're ready to proceed in the mayor's office to do some work to bring the community together to come up with a citizen oversight board or committee after that happens.
You have told me before, when it comes to that community oversight group and what they're calling for, the petition they submitted, that you're not 100% on board with their idea. What don't you like about their idea?
Well, I believe that every citizen has the right to petition the government or to try and change the charter. I was actually pushed to have the law changed in the state some years ago to make it easier to do that. So I believe in that. But this particular charter amendment, proposed charter amendment, I have questions about the membership of the Citizen Oversight Board. Police and former police are excluded from it. Additionally, I have questions about how it would affect our budget. I don't think we should be budgeting for our city in charter amendments. I think that's up to the council every year. So I have questions about it. But at the end of the day, we're either going to implement what gets adopted by the citizens, or we're going to have a Citizens Oversight Board that comes out of my office.
And what would be the time? Let's say this gets voted down, okay? I think people want to know, what's the timeline? Are you going to drag your feet, or is this going to be like, we have a plan, let's go?
Well, within a week or so of being sworn in, I asked the legal director for a draft. So I was ready to go, but then the Community Oversight Now started their endeavor, and I felt it was best to defer to them. If it does not pass in November, if it gets on the ballot, I will promptly bring people together, members of the community, members of the law enforcement community, and come together and reach a conclusion about citizen oversight of our police department. What
would you like to see a board look like?
Well, I don't have a specific list of people that should be on it or a specific number, but my sense is that it needs to be a good cross-section of the community, and it needs to be a group of people that are committed to keeping ourselves safe, but also committed to making sure that policing is done in such a way so that it is effective and respectful of all of our communities here in Nashville.
Lonnell, I want to bring you into this conversation, and obviously I think that the frustration is really just at a high point in this community right now on two fronts. On one front, just the amount of especially youth crime that is taking place in our community, and not just maybe, you know, vandalism here or a theft here, but very serious crimes involving kids. And gun crimes. And then on the other hand, you also have two police officer involved fatal shootings in a matter of about a year and a half. Bring me into where you are mixing in on this and how your group, how your role mixes in on this.
So first, the frustration is rightfully so. I mean, the community has a lot to be frustrated about. We are seeing young people commit more excessive crimes than we have in the past. And a lot of the community wants to feel safe. At the same time, they don't want to feel victimized in their communities. And so when you have the two officer-involved shootings that we've had in the past 18 months, you have to look for a solution. Well, first you have to assess what we're doing. You have to ask, why do people feel over-policed? Why do people feel victimized? What are things that we're doing? What are policies that we have in place that we probably need to assess and change? And how can we effectively do that, but also make sure that at the end of the day, law enforcement is doing their job, and that job is to lower crime in our communities. So what I've been doing is really looking at other cities, other states. Of course, we look across the state. Memphis and Knoxville, they have community oversight boards in place. We've looked at them just to make sure that we are staying within state law to form any draft of executive order that the mayor may use in the future. But we're also looking beyond Tennessee for best practices. We've been in contact with the National Association for Community Oversight of Law Enforcement. They've been consulting us on drafting the executive order. They've been consulting us on best practices. I've been in communication with the Policing Project. I was actually working with them when the former administration first engaged them, and so knowing that what they were working on, knowing the new scope and direction that Mayor Briley has given them, I've been able to give them some direction of what they could come in and complete with that engagement that will help us take law enforcement move law enforcement forward. And with youth violence, we've also been working with how do we really engage the grassroots organizations that have relationships with young people in the communities, that probably have a closer reach to engaging young people. Mayor Briley is actually funding some of those organizations for the first time in the history of Metro government, and so I've been working with those organizations on the contracts. We're going to be doing capacity building with those organizations to really help them grow so that they can expand their reach, and it's something that we see as a pilot going forward, where we can engage more grassroots organizations to help our young people, because we have to do something new. We have to get some fresh faces in there, and we have to build capacity and make sure young people have enough to engage with.
Fantastic. Our phone lines are lit up. We're going to take a quick commercial break. I know that Dan, Jerry, Amigo, and many more are on the phone lines. We're going to get to your calls right after this. Stay with us.